Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with your host, Rosie Gilmoss, and joining me today, I've got Melissa Eboch. Hello, Melissa.
Hello.
And thank you so much for joining us. And I won't repeat the time difference anecdote that I've said twice when we tried to record this introduction, but I will just explain that you are from the USA, aren't you? You're joining us from America.
Yeah, I live in Virginia.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. And I like the fact that we're having a reach over that side of the pond as well. So for our listeners, I'm just going to sort of explain that this is going to be quite a difficult one because Melissa was widowed fairly recently, weren't you, essentially for the second time. So this is going to touch on some issues, sort of addiction and mental health and ultimately suicide. So it is going to be difficult for her to tell her story. It's going to be difficult for me to listen to it, and it's going to be difficult for you guys. But I'm so honoured that you have chosen to come on and talk to me, because this must be incredibly raw, but also, like so many of these stories, incredibly important, because as you know, I know, mental health is, it's in such crisis in both our countries.
Yeah.
So I won't keep rattling on. I will ask you, if you don't mind, just to tell your story. What brought you here?
Sure. I guess it makes sense to do chronological. So my first husband was Ryan.
Can jump around, don't worry too much.
I'm sure we will. My first husband's name was Ryan. We met in 2005 through mutual friends. He was a musician and just kind of a fun guy to hang out with. We were still in our mid-20s. I'd just graduated from college, so I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but fell into a fun group of friends. And we hit it off. We dated for 2 years. He was playing music. I was working various, office jobs. And then we got engaged in 2007. And we had decided early on, we wanted to have kids. It was important to me that I stay home with them, at least for the first couple of years. And we didn't quite know how that was going to happen, but that was just sort of what we wanted, despite the fact that I was the one with a college degree and he had not gone to college, but he was on board.
Yeah.
We ended up moving to Nashville and in 2010 to pursue his music passion. Things didn't quite pan out.
Country music.
Well, no, it's funny because he actually hated country music. But it was more of like the songwriter.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was more of the songwriter, okay. Other people doing what he loved to do. DC, which is where we were, is a lot on performance. But when he got to Nashville, he realized I'm actually more of a performer. So he was actually traveling back to play with his old band once a weekend or once a month for, a weekend, and they'd pack in like 6 shows in that weekend, and then he'd come home exhausted. But he loved it. He was living his dream. He was making music as a living and playing music and performing. It was rather lucrative. But it wasn't a great long-term plan. So unbeknownst to me, he had laid the groundwork to enlist in the Navy. And once he had passed his ASVABs, we had talked about military, and I knew that was an option. I was in full support. But he kind of did it all on his own. He just wanted to make sure that it was going to happen before telling me. So he got his ASVABs back, and he had his choice. ASVABs are the tests that kind of give you your options of what you can do in the military, what your jobs are.
Thank you for clarifying.
Sure. So he scored very high, so he had his choice of what he wanted to do. So he picked his job and told me he was leaving for boot camp in a couple months, and then he got a call from his recruiter and said he could leave in a couple weeks. So we said, okay, let's do this. Yep. We only had 2 dogs. We had no kids. We were just kind of,
okay.
flying around.
Less traumatic.
Yes. I was totally on board. So he left January 25th and finished boot camp on March 25th. I ended up moving up there because he was stationed there for a year to be in school. I got pregnant shortly after I moved there, and then we had our son in February of 2012, just outside the training camp in Great Lakes, or training base for boot camp. And then we moved to Virginia.
In a hospital or right outside the base?
Right, yeah, just right outside the base. Just yeah, they wouldn't let him off work. So no, just kidding. That one was a hospital birth. That was my only hospital birth, but
Oh, real?
yeah. So we moved to Virginia because that's where he was going to school for another year. So Liam was 2 weeks old at the time when we moved. That was a fun one. 2 weeks postpartum, and we actually had the greatest bunch of movers. We moved 6 times within the military, but these ladies really took care of us. It was our first and only team of all
Female
women.
movers as well.
They were the packers, right? So they packed so well, and yeah, we didn't have anything break.
Makes so much sense.
It does. It really does.
Why is this not more of a thing?
Yes, and they were delightful. I would just be nursing. I would have to take a nap. They would kind of pack around me, anyway, they were great. So we moved back closer to DC. I was about an hour outside DC, which was great because my family and my parents, everybody was within driving distance for that first year with Liam. And then we got his orders and we were stationed in San Diego, which is what we were really hoping for. We had always dreamed of just kind of traveling and living anywhere. And we were open to anything. So we went to San Diego. I fell in love with it. I loved it. And then we got our orders to Hawaii because his ship was repositioning. So, so then we moved when I was 8 weeks pregnant with our second son and a 2-year-old to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. So we were there.
Culture shock, I imagine.
Huge. It was like living in another country. It was wild. I mean, it was wonderful. It was something that I never would have experienced. Ryan opened up my world in ways that others never could have and probably never will. Just the experiences that we were able to have together. And he was always up for anything, and we would just, he was an adventure loving guy. So we had our second son.
You speak about him. That's lovely.
He was fun. The Navy did a number on him because the person he was when we first got married, when we first met, was vastly different than the man that was left. When his time there ended. In Hawaii.
Military.
Oh, sorry. 6 years.
6 years.
So that was his minimum contract. He did 2 years of school and then 4 years of active duty ship assignment. So our second son, Carter, was born at home in Hawaii in a lovely birthing tub. It was one of Ryan's proudest moments.
So long?
Yeah, a little bit. Did a little bit of that. He was so proud of me and so proud just to see and to witness, what birth could be versus Liam's wasn't traumatic at all, but it was definitely a different experience. And I had told him I wanted it to be different. And he was just, he was a dad of 2. Carter was actually born on Liam's 3rd birthday. It was his due date.
That's handy, but also quite expensive.
Yeah. Liam came, it was the first night he'd actually slept all through the night. And came downstairs on his 3rd birthday to a brother. So that was a
fun gift. There we go.
Yeah. So the next couple of years were tough. Ryan he was not deployed, but he would go out to sea. So he'd go out for 2 weeks, come back for a week, out for 3 days, come back for 4. It was just a lot they ran training exercises. So, and then he was on duty so it'd be a 24-hour duty schedule every 7 days. So he would leave at 6 a.m. one morning and then come home after work the following day. So there was a lot of solo parenting, but he was such a good house partner. He was my favorite roommate, I like to say. He pulled his weight. He loved going grocery shopping with me, meal planning. He was a fantastic cook. Even after we got divorced, he would make food and bring it over for me. So
Oh,
yeah, he was a really, really generous guy in a lot of ways. He did
I'm
struggle
guessing it
with,
went wrong because you said divorced, and obviously I know he was your
yeah,
ex-husband. So sorry, I'm interrupting you.
yeah.
I should let you just tell the story, but
No,
I'm
no,
getting
no,
ahead.
it's fine. There was a lot
He
of
just
really
sounds so
great things
perfect.
about him. Oh, yes. In the Navy, there's a lot of, I mean, with military, there's a lot, shit rolls downhill, so he got a lot of things handed to him that he didn't feel he was deserving of, or, he would get passed over for promotions. He'd always struggled with addiction, specifically alcohol. He was a big pot smoker in high school, and he had stopped all that, but the drinking did continue. And I don't know how he did this, but he would drink every night and still wake up at 6 a.m. every morning, walk our two dogs, and then get on his scooter and go to the ship. I mean, for 4 years, he did it. He was
Mm.
like a machine. But I hit a point where I couldn't take when we were still in Hawaii, he would come home and unload on me, and emotionally I couldn't withstand it. Looking back, there was a lot of gaslighting and emotional
Right.
abuse, that it was not intended, but if I did something wrong, he'd give me the silent treatment for days, and it was just very tense.
Okay.
Um, so I requested that we go to couples counseling, and we went, and the counselor basically said, until you stop drinking, we can't we
Yeah.
can't do anything. So he went into rehab, or it was like military rehab. So he still was working, but also going to classes. And that worked for a couple months. He slid back into drinking. And so a number of things happened that sort of opened my eyes to the life I was living, and it wasn't what I wanted for me or for my kids to see as a marriage, um, as their example of a loving husband and wife. So as much
Yeah.
as I didn't want to break up my family, I felt like I had to. We moved back to Virginia when he got out, and in March I requested that he move out and that we separate and divorce. He did not take it well. Yeah,
Mm.
he did not take it well. He actually tried to pull a gun on me to threaten to kill himself in front of me. I had taken the gun out of the house, yeah, and gave it to a friend because I knew that he was going to do something like that. This is a story throughout my life. I can foresee a lot of things. Usually it has to do with like violence or death, but I knew that something was going to happen. And I always knew that Ryan was going to leave us early. I don't know. I don't know
Mm.
how, but it was just something that in my bones. I was always terrified driving with him because it was like he thought that he was going to die in a car accident, and he told me. And then so anytime we're driving on highways, I'm just trying not to freak out and panic. Um, but it
Oh.
wasn't a car accident. Spoiler alert.
Well, Ben used to say to me that he thought he had a feeling he would die at the same age his dad died, and his dad was in
Mm,
his 60s. And I used to say to him, don't say that. There's no
yeah,
reason for you to think that. And of course, thinking 60 was far too young. And
was too
here we
young.
go, right?
Exactly. Yeah, he thought he would die
I
at
don't know if this is.
28. So we passed that, and I was like,
Oh,
"Oh,
did
okay, we're
he?
good." Yeah.
Do you think that's part of the kind of rock star or music, that kind of
Yes.
live fast, die young? And I have written down in my notes, A Star is Born. Like
Mm.
there's some
Oh,
similarities to the film, right?
that one is more Will, but yes, yeah.
Oh, is it? Two
Hmm.
musicians.
Yes. I have a type, Rosie. I have a type.
Yeah, but type, I was going to say.
Clearly,
I've
broken
we we have a kind of
musicians.
north-south divide in our country.
Yeah.
But I've had two northern husbands, so I've got a bit of a track record now. So sorry, just continue and just tell us what happened now, because that sounds really, really scary that somebody that you had loved and had children with would take out. I mean, obviously we don't have guns here, and so it's kind of even more alien for us. But the
Hmm.
idea that somebody would pull a gun out in front of you and threaten to kill themselves is really, really scary. And you must have felt quite frightened for yourself as well.
Well, he didn't have access to the gun because I had given it to a friend.
Oh,
But when he went for it, where it had been kept, I just ran out of the house and took off. And then I ended up calling the police. So he had a bit of a standoff with them, didn't want to come out. Anyway, long story short, he ended up going to just as a psych hospital for a couple days to be watched and make sure everything is okay. And he kind of went into a downward spiral after that. We didn't hear from him for a couple months. He couldn't take the boys. He didn't have anywhere to live. But he did crawl out. He found an apartment. He got a job. He went back to school using the GI Bill, which is something that veterans get when you serve. And so he used that to get his associate's degree in electrical. I think it's electrical engineering. I can't quite remember, but he got a good job. He met somebody, and they ended up getting married at the end of 2020, I think. Yeah, 2020. And she had 2 girls. She has 2 girls. And then with his 2 boys, they just kind of had like a little mini Brady Bunch family. They bought a house, and things were going well for him. You know, he was also playing music still, but not as his main job. And because of COVID, the boys typically were just with him every other weekend. But since they were learning from home, we were able to work it so that last year of his life, they were there every other week, which I am so thankful for. And they really got
just, as you said that, I thought, I bet you're so grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. They got to know him and spend time with him in ways that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do.
But that's almost a mixed blessing, right? Because they're now closer
Yeah.
to him, so the loss is harder. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's a complicated death when you have a child who that's not their primary caregiver. You know, they were with me most of the time, except for that last year. So being at our house, well, fast forward, or I'm jumping ahead, but it's just a different kind of grief, you know, because it's not in their face all the time. So the 2021 is when he passed. I got a call the boys were with me that weekend. That week, I got a call at like 2 a.m. And it was from his wife. And I thought first it was a pocket dial, so I ignored it. And then she called right back, and I thought, he's been in an accident. And then I'm laying in bed, and we have a king size bed. Will's downstairs. My second husband is downstairs with our older son watching a movie. I know, 2 a.m. neurodivergent family. We don't sleep normally.
No judgment here. I'm like a Victorian ghost. I waft around at all hours.
And I've got the other kids in bed with me. And so I kind of extricate myself out. I'm answering the phone, and she's like, "Missy, Ryan's gone." And I said, "What? What?" That's all I remember saying is just over and over, like, "What? What are you talking about?" And she said, "He's dead." And I said, "Did he take something?" And that was my first thought. That was just my first thought, because he had dabbled with that throughout our entire relationship. And after, and she said, "I think so, but I don't know. I don't know what to do." And that's when, and then Liam and Carter just kind of like, I remember I could visually see it almost. They just went through my mind, and that's when I dropped to the floor and the death wail, you know, it was,
Yeah.
I never thought I would have that type of reaction for my ex-husband, who was not so great to me at the end. But it was, yeah. Yep.
It's primal, and that was a man that you loved, and you loved from a very young age, and you kind of grew up together, and you say yourself, you did some wonderful, exciting, magical things together. And because the end of your relationship had soured, which sounds really like it was the booze. I mean, it distorts people, any addiction, anybody in active addiction. And so, you're grieving for that. You're grieving for that person, and also for your boys, because
my
their boys'
boys.
dad has gone. And and watching your children in pain and I remember looking at my boys, particularly because my daughter was so young, and just thinking, I'm supposed to protect you. I'm supposed to protect you from this stuff, and I can't. It's really tough. It really is tough. And you said the other children, by this point, did you have your daughter as well?
Yes. Yep. So that was
So you were
2021.
married
So going back, Will and I met in 2017. So Ryan and I split in March of 2017. I decided in July or August, I thought, all I do is sit at home when the boys are at Ryan's. Maybe I'll just date, we'll just see what's out there. And Will was actually my first match on Bumble, and he was my first date. And when I met him, I sat down and I said to myself, not to him, but I said, "Oh, there you are. I've been looking for you." and and I was like,
oh, I know how it ends as well.
Yeah, he's
I'm sorry, because
my twin flame.
I just want to, when with my sorry, just to draw you back in again. So when Ryan died, the assumption was that he had probably taken something.
Yes.
Did it transpire that he had?
Yes. So we didn't find out for quite a while that he. So we had known that she had known. I didn't get the full story from her for quite some time. Things were a little tumultuous after he died, but we didn't get the toxicology report back until it was probably 9 months. I mean, it was a long time. So
wow, that's long.
Yeah, so me telling the kids was difficult because they had just talked to him at 8 p.m. the night prior, and here I am telling them Saturday at noon that their dad's gone, and I don't know how. And, they didn't really ask for specifics. So Liam was 9, Carter was 6. But I basically said, we think he took something that made his heart and his body stop working. And we'll know more, and I'll tell you as soon as we know. And we did it all together. I mean, we had everybody on the bed. It was me and Will, and Emma was there, our daughter, and the boys. And, it's like I was Googling before, how do you tell your kids that their parent died? I mean, all these it was just, I never thought that would be a Google search of mine.
No, that would be in your Google history. And I'm thinking as well that when I did the same thing, the primary guidance that I was given was that you must be clear. You must be, they need facts. And I'm thinking, you don't have them. You don't have them. All you are just telling us that your dad's dead, and I don't know how. And for a child, we talk a lot about adults in the response to death, and it's like, but how? Because we're all a little bit scared of our mortality. But for a child, like, they're inquisitive. But I'm also hearing they're 9 and 6, which is not dissimilar to the ages my boys were, and they kind of they were upset, and then they kind of that psychopath thing where they just went and played Harry Potter.
Yep.
And you question what's going on, but then this is what talking about it does, because then I think every person I've spoken to, their children who's had children, they've had a similar reaction where you question, like, what's the matter with you? Why aren't you crying? And then of course it begins to come out, but initially they go into shock, don't they?
Yeah, Carter, he told me later that he pretended to cry, and he felt bad that he didn't really feel like he could cry. He didn't cry either time when I told him. Liam, both times. Liam is very emotional and sensitive, and I mean, they're both very sensitive, but Liam demonstrates it in a different way. And I remember thinking, like, you're not crying. Okay, I'm sure that's probably normal. It's shock, talking myself through these things. But 10 minutes later, they're like, okay, we're gonna go play on the outside. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and you almost take it. I took it as almost like a personal affront. Like, can't you see how upset I am?
Don't you want to sit here and cry about this? This is very sad.
What's the matter with me? Why am I trying to force my children to be sad? But it's such a confusing time. And of course, as you know yourself, that the grief does come out.
It does.
So after 9 months, you presumably finally get your toxicology report. And what did that say?
So he had died of ethanol alcohol and fentanyl. So when I had talked to, which he would never, ever have taken these pills if he had known that there was fentanyl in them. I mean, I can tell you 100% there is no way. But his wife did tell me later, these were pills that he found on the side of the road. He Googled them, he looked them up. Yeah. But this is addiction, right? This is addiction. He sees this as this, like, what a gift, from the universe. But he had taken them and felt weird. she said that he took them and felt weird, and she said, throw them away, like get rid of them. And I guess he had lied to her and told her he had, but he didn't. So he had gone upstairs and
For an
locked
addict
the
to part
door. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
with the thing. No, it's okay.
Oh
But it's a
gosh.
slight time delay. It's for an addict to part with something that the addiction demon is telling them they need.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to throw that away.
Mm-mm. No.
Oh, what a shame, and what a tragic waste of a life. Oh, and how are you still in contact with his wife? Do you have any? I'm just wondering whether you're sort of widow united or.
Yeah, immediately after his death, it was difficult. I was not included in the funeral. I was allowed to attend, but I will say this: my name, the fact that he was married to me was not mentioned at the funeral, and I was removed from all pictures. So,
No.
yes, Rosie, they had like
God,
probably 200 pictures, and none of them were the ones that I shared that were of our family. And I think back to it even today, and I think that wasn't just a slap in my face, that was a slap in my boy's face.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
this isn't about me. And I mean, I learned the term disenfranchised grief. And I felt that to my core. You know, we had a mutual friend who actually got up and left in the middle of the service because he was so offended that they had purposefully left me out of all the eulogies.
May I just ask you, and I probably should know this, but what's disenfranchised grief?
Oh, so disenfranchised grief is basically where you don't feel like you have the right to grieve. People essentially push you to the outside and say, well, you were the ex, you and your dad weren't on good terms. You know, you were adopted, so why would you be sad about your birth mom dying? Like things like that, where it's like people trying to put labels on on your grief, and which is just so absurd.
Well,
but
as we know, you can't do that.
Yeah, I realize now it wasn't about me. She later apologized, though it wasn't just her. It was also his best friend and his brothers that were part of those decisions. But she apologized and said she had no idea what it did, you know, what it would have done or the impact that it had on me. And that, you know, I am probably living with the grief in a way that she never will. You know, she doesn't have children with him. Yes, her life changed and the direction of it did, but my life from today on is, you know, irrevocably changed. Yeah. Excuse me. They were married less than a year.
To him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, not that I'm dismissing that, but
no,
you know,
yes,
there is a huge fundamental passage of time that's gone between the two of you, and you know, you have these living and breathing parts of him that really need to be included, because enabling, as we just talked about, enabling children to process their grief is important, however they may choose to do it. But actually being kind of whitewashed out of his history is at the funeral is feels kind of cruel. But I'm also trying to be empathetic to a woman who's lost her husband. So
right. It was just strange. They would say,
isn't it?
Yeah, they would talk about Liam and Carter and how they were his, you know, greatest joy and things like that. And I'm just thinking in the back of my mind, Immaculate Conception? Like, where did these joyous sons come from?
yeah. He's raising them now. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I feel like I've sort of whistle-stopped you through the death of your first husband, which feels really brutal. But you know, if you will come to me with two dead husbands, I can only do what I can do, right?
Yep.
So the aftermath of this must have left you reeling, and you have, by this point, you're married to Will, and you have your daughter, and so you've built a life, a new life, a life that includes Will in terms of, you know, you're still in contact and things like this, but you have a new life. So you talk a bit disenfranchised grief, which is a kind of sideline of grief, perhaps, a sort of a grief adjacent, maybe. I think we use that term here sometimes. But obviously you're still hurting, and you're really, really hurting. And this is in, you say 2021?
Yep, June. Yeah, he died June 19th.
And you lost Will this year, isn't that right? So 23. Yes. So within 2 years, you lost two men that you loved so passionately. And I told you before we came on mic that I had a little look on your Facebook, just nosy. And some of the things that you wrote, and the way you described him and the way he had struggled, because we'll go into your story, but he struggled with mental illness. And I just, like, the goosebumps went up, and I just felt this real kind of sadness, because you obviously loved him so much, and he obviously loved you so much. And there's a quote that you put up, and I wrote it down because it says, even if you fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I really like that, and I think I'm going to put it somewhere in my house. But he didn't manage to get himself back up, and the tragedy of that is that you were left widowed again, and now with 3 children. In fact, 4, because he had a son as well, didn't he? So,
Yep.
if you wouldn't mind, I feel really like I'm brutal going, right, you've done that one.
No,
tell us about the next one now.
You're fine.
But if you wouldn't mind, just because it's incomprehensible to me that you would endure such a loss again. So just tell us how on earth this happened.
Yeah. So I'll go back to when we met. So we are kind of jumping around, I guess. But I met Will in 2017. He was my first date after separating from Ryan. We met on Bumble. We matched on Bumble, and then we went out to dinner. And as soon as I met him, I knew this is my other half. This is the person that I had been looking for. He felt like home. And we had a great dinner, and yeah, we just had a great dinner. We ended up meeting the next day for coffee, and it just kind of took off from there. But we didn't start dating for almost a year and a half, strangely enough. Yes, we were friends. We were best friends.
Right,
almost.
Just friends? Yeah.
Well, once I made it clear to
Almost
him.
platonic, you were going to say.
Almost. I made it clear to him that I was not interested in like dating around, and if he was ready to date again, that that's what I wanted to do. He was just fresh coming off heartbreak, and that poor man went through a lot. And I won't go too much into his story as far as that goes, but he was still really hurting. So I said, okay, you can't show up for me in that way. Let's just be friends. Like, let's just help each other through life. And because of him, I started down this rabbit hole of attachment theory, and just kind of opened up the world to figuring out why we do the things we do, why we pick the people we pick, why we act certain ways in relationships. And that I've always been interested in psychology and relational psychology, but after meeting Will, it just took on a whole new life, where I felt like now I have a project, or I have like a subject that I can figure out. You're my puzzle. We just taught each other a lot of things. We showed up for each other. We processed so much sadness and grief together. I was still dating people. He was dating people. We would run things past each other. Like, do you think this is normal? And he basically taught me how to be treated by a man, not just as his friend, but by telling me this behavior isn't appropriate. What he's saying to you is not okay. Because I had been with Ryan for so long that I really had lost touch with that. And maybe I didn't even know to begin with, I just kind of was winging it, but I found myself a really, really good man. And everybody was kind of held up to that sort of standard. And the whole time I'm like, I think we'd be really good together. And he's like, I just don't think I have those feelings for you. But then we'd drink too much and we'd end up sleeping together sometimes, and then the next morning he'd be like, well, I still don't think this is going to work. And I'm like, okay, whatever, that's fine. But that happened, rarely. It wasn't. Yeah. Oh yeah. It wasn't like every weekend thing. It was like a couple of times. But we ended up being roommates, because I couldn't afford the house that Ryan and I had rented together, and he was living in the house that he and his ex-wife had rented together. So we said, I'll just move in the basement. It'll be great. We can cook meals together and stuff. So I moved in. Things are awesome. We just got along fabulously. Our kids got along, and Ryan wasn't happy about it. That was sort of the start of his ramped up kind of, anger towards me, probably because he thought I was moving on, even though I told him we're not dating. This is just a friend thing. But Will was seriously my protector when it came to Ryan. There was a point where I wouldn't even let Ryan text me. He had to go through Will, and it was Will's suggestion.
Oh, wow.
He's like, let me do the coordination. You don't need to be abused by him. And so I said, okay. And he did. He did that for a long time. So we ended up moving, still as friends, down to an area called Southern Maryland. It's off the water. His family lives down there. Will's family is from there. And about 2 weeks after we moved in, we had a night where we were sitting outside on the dock and looking up at the stars, and we saw this huge shooting star, and it was reflected in the water, and it was amazing. And he just started crying and said, I love you. I have always loved you. I am not running anymore. I'm ready to do this. And I was like, okay, let's do this. So we did.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, we started dating, and I got pregnant with Emma. I found out on Mother's Day in May of 2019. And yeah, the pregnancy year was good. We'd gotten sober in March because he was a drinker. But we realized, we're drinking because we feel lonely, and now we have each other. So why don't we just quit it? We're feeling yucky, and it's okay. It's expensive, so we got sober in March, and yeah, remained sober for 2 years. But Emma was born in 2020, January 2020. She also was born at home, and he caught her. Yeah, she was. We had a couple scares with her, with her breathing. She was born really fast. So less than 24 hours after she was born, we think she came out and didn't clear all the fluid from her lungs.
Yeah.
So I had to take her to the hospital. We ended up going to Children's. Will's at home with the kids. I'm at Children's Hospital just having given birth. And anyway, he just always showed up. He was always there to hold down the fort in emergencies, in crises. She had a couple scares after COVID, and we ended up having to medevac her to Children's Hospital. And he stayed with her the entire time, overnight, held her the whole time. I mean, he loved that little girl probably more than me. He really was, he said she was his greatest love, and greatest joy. No offense, Isaac. He loved you too very much, but there's something special about a girl, something special about the girl, the daddy bond, and they had it. So I would say 2020 was when it started to get rough. I'd found a job. I waited until about a month after I'd given birth, and then I started working. It was a remote job anyway, so he had been working remotely as well. So we were both at home, and the plan was to keep Emma at home with us just for the first couple months anyway. So it just sort of all worked out. But we also had the boys home, so we had a newborn, 2 parents working full time, and 3 at-home learners. One was in kindergarten, so you can imagine how much online learning is happening. No. Yeah, not a lot. Yeah. It was just the amount of stress that we were under was astronomical. He'd been diagnosed with ADHD a couple years ago, and it happened really slowly, but he started to abuse the medication so that he could work. They had him working almost around the clock. He had to do shifts for this one company, this one client, and then also handle his regular clients during the day. So he was working, 4-day, almost 20-hour shifts, and it was just unbelievable. And so that was his
for
crutch.
anybody that isn't aware, the ADHD meds are a stimulant, aren't they? I take
Stimulant,
ADHD meds,
yeah.
and in the correct dose, you don't get any sort of buzz or high. That's kind of one of the ways they can tell if you have ADHD, is how the effects of the meds.
Yeah, it makes you focus. Yeah.
But, basically, I can finish a conversation, but if you abuse them, and I haven't, but they, I guess, would have a sort of amphetamine type effect, enabling you to go longer at work. And I suppose, yes, you can see how they are open to abuse, and I imagine they're very tightly controlled over there. They are here. And did you know that this was happening? Because if he wasn't at home as much, oh no, he was at home.
He was at home.
Sorry, I've lost my trajectory here. He was at home.
No,
So
it's okay.
and I'm guessing prescriptions need filling more frequently. There were sort of signs that this wasn't right.
Yes, he would run out
I'm
of
being nosy,
prescription. No, you're fine. He would run out of his prescription very quickly. I was also on the same medication, so he would ask me for some just to get through his workday, and I enabled it. I, fully admit to that, and just to help him survive, and to keep our life moving forward, and for him to keep his job, basically. But yeah, he would take it. He would work for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, as much.
So presumably he's not sleeping, which is really, really bad for your physical and mental health.
He's not sleeping. He had sleep apnea, just from other issues. So his sleep was hard anyway, but especially when you're on, stimulants. So when he would crash for 2 days, 3 days. And I'm talking like sleeping the entire time. Like you couldn't wake him up. Like he would maybe get up to pee. I would make sure his water was filled. I would come in and check on him. Are you going to get up? Are you like, what's going on? Can I get you some food? Just trying to, and then I'm left, trying to get everybody still going and working my job. And there were times where I would need to go meet Ryan and drop the boys off, and he would agree to watch Emma, and then he'd be asleep. And so I'd have to take her, and she'd scream the entire way, and I would come home so pissed off and so angry. One time we were at the ER, she had an ear infection, and he dropped us off, and he said, call me when you're ready to be picked up. I did, and he didn't pick up. He was just asleep. He never would have left us there, but he did. And I had to call his sister to come pick us up. He just couldn't be roused.
And is that, do you think, like a sort of depressive state? Yeah. Like a almost, I'm forgetting, that sort
catatonic.
What's the word where you're just, thank you, yes, thank you. Because that can be sort of symptomatic of an ADHD spiral, can't it? To go into that, I stare at a wall, and you sort of go, it's shut down. Yeah. It's a neurospicy shutdown. But 3 days is excessive. And would he just be completely asleep, or would he be talking?
Asleep. Okay. I could sometimes get him to talk, but for the most part, he was just like, I'm just so tired. I think it was the dopamine and the serotonin and all the stuff that was so high. And then he would crash, and it was withdrawal and his body detoxing. And that was how he got better. Even when he was sick with the flu, he would just go into hibernation. Yeah.
I sleep when I'm ill, God, I mean, this just sounds really chaotic and difficult, and kind of almost like it came kind of not from nowhere, because you do refer to him having, a difficult past and having had a difficult relationship. But it seems like, and obviously I have no idea of the time scale, but it seems like it sort of seemed to go from, I've got a plateau, like I'm safe, I've got my island here. And then your island starts to rock and becomes addicted. And you've lived through addiction. You don't want to live through addiction again. And so what happened?
Yeah, we were saving for a house. We actually put an offer on a house during the good time. We had a significant amount of savings, and we were really putting these pieces into place that we were excited about. I think it was just COVID and the amount of medication, I think, permanently changed his brain in ways that he couldn't come back from. He eventually started drinking again. We moved
to come back down, presumably, as well, because
we moved nearby, but we moved in April, and he lost his job in July, shortly after Ryan died. So this is 2021. Emma's 1. And Ryan dies in June. He died Friday, Father's Day, Sunday. So we tell the boys on Saturday. I know it's like the worst fucking time of year. He dies his Father's Day, and then his birthday. It's like June, the end of June. I'm just like, thanks, Ryan.
Sounds like March for me. He died the day after Mother's Day. So Mother's Day, and then like my birthday and his death day, and it's March. It's just like,
yeah. Let's just forget about June. So we tell them on Saturday, and then Father's Day, he goes down, and he's not present. He is sleeping. And I'm like, this is our son's first Father's Day without their dad, who died, 2 days ago. Wake the fuck up. Show up, please. And he
Mm,
couldn't. He literally couldn't. And so I took the kids down to his mom's, and I was just so angry because at that
yeah,
time I still believed it was um that he could it was intentional. Not intentional like he was trying to hurt
yeah,
us, but that he could just wake up. He could just drink a Red Bull. No. No.
yeah, yeah. Have a
He
coffee.
couldn't.
Yeah.
He couldn't. That was not that his the cellular exhaustion was otherworldly. Um so he was let go in July from his very very good job. They loved him. They made accommodations for him. He was one of their top employees for 5 years, but he just was not reliable. He couldn't show up for meetings. He would cancel things last minute, and it was just becoming a problem with the clients. So when that happened, I said, okay, something's something's got to give. What if you go to rehab? I know you're actually, he hadn't been drinking yet. Sorry. He started drinking when he came back from rehab. So yeah. So he went into rehab with but an Adderall addiction, essentially an Adderall abuse problem. Um, and we I made it very clear before he went. We both said we really want this to be focused on trauma, not on substance abuse. We have to get at the heart of what's going on. I had just started learning about complex PTSD, and
Yep.
all the effects of that, and how it can mask as borderline personality disorder,
BPD. Yeah.
and bipolar, and major depressive
Hmm.
disorder. And I just said, this is it, this. And he said, yeah. And we were reading Pete Walker's book, Complex PTSD, from Surviving to Thriving. And he said, this book is me. Everything about this book is me.
I'm writing it
Yeah,
down.
it's so good. It's the Bible of CPTSD. I highly recommend it. Um, but they did not focus on trauma. They just did the basic, hey, let's not drink, let's go to AA. So he did the 30 days. I can't remember, but he was gone for like 3 months. He came back and was feeling good, but he did not go through the whole program because they wanted him to stay up in New Jersey, which is about 3 hours from us. And he's like, I'm ready to come home. I can't be away from you guys anymore. So he came home and was ready to make changes, and but could not find that motivation to really find a job and move forward. It was like he was learning more about himself, but at the same time it was making him more depressed, because there's really there's no cure to complex PTSD, and the amount of work that it takes to dig yourself out of this lifelong hole, and battles that you've been fighting your whole life, just seemed
Yeah.
daunting.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, we tried different modalities, but we were on Medicaid at the time. I lost my job in actually no, I didn't lose my job until this last November, but um, we were in therapy. He was in therapy. We were doing couples therapy, and he was in individual therapy, but he could not find a job. And then he found one and he couldn't keep it. And it was not him, it was not, I felt like his
Uh,
brain had just changed.
but also, if he has had ADHD, and as many of us do, we rely on those meds in the correct dose
Hmm.
to enable us to kind of to function and to work and sort of perform to the best of our ability. And so I thought you said that he didn't have any, neither of you had any medication at this point. So that must be really hard
Yeah.
for both of you because trying, especially once you have seen the world through medication
Hmm.
and realize that's how everybody else's brain works, to then have that kind of that gift taken away from you, that even that must have been very
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. He tried all sorts of other non-stimulants, and they would make him feel, horrible, or, too jittery. It was just, varying side effects that he was very, very sensitive to medications. And so he spent that year trying to find something else essentially that helped him
Yeah.
focus, but it wasn't as addictive. Um, Yeah. So in November of 2022, I lost my job, and that took a kind of pulled the rug out from under us because I was the only one providing at that point. That was where our health insurance came from and our, monthly paycheck. I was getting survivor benefits from Social Security for the boys, which helped, enormously, but it's not a lot of money. But
Yeah.
it helped make ends meet. So that was a whole another load of pressure on me.
And I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
just to interject, but did you lose your job because as a result of what was going on and the fact that you couldn't access your medication and you're having, there is chaos reigning in your home?
No,
Is that why you lost your
no, I
job?
actually kept that pretty well hidden. It was a reduction in force, so my job was
Mm,
just redundant. And they had, they may have let me go because I was one of the ones on the lower. I wasn't performing to my highest ability, but I never had any complaints or anything like that.
yeah.
I had lots of positive reviews from coworkers and management and my clients, but yeah, it's just kind of one of those things.
I've, as you're speaking, I've written down the word human shield because I feel like that's what you were to your family. I feel
Yeah.
like you were this human shield that took the force of the blow and kept
Mm,
the ship afloat. And then your legs get knocked beneath you because you no longer have the financial wherewithal to care for your family. And
yeah.
that is an enormous stress on a family who are already under stress.
Yeah. Yeah, that rings very true. I appreciate you seeing that because that definitely is what it felt like for sure.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I don't know. I had been stressing about financial stuff and complaining to Will for months, so I don't know how much additional stress he felt because of my lack of employment, but I'm sure it was a lot,
but you will have felt it, and you
Yes.
are as important in this
Yes,
story as
yes.
he is because you are taking the force of the blow here.
Yeah.
So presumably things deteriorated from this point, and his depression sort of it referred to sort of treatment-resistant depression, which is, in my mind, the scariest
Ugh,
type of depression
yes.
because where do you go from there?
Mm,
And I wondered about sort of. I know America is a little bit more forward-thinking in terms of alternative therapies like ketamine and MDMA and things like this, but obviously for an addict, that is a difficult area to explore.
We did, we did talk about that. We did some psilocybin
Mm,
sessions. Where we microdosed, and it helped, but it still wasn't. You have to do it in conjunction with therapy, and just doing it on a
yeah,
Friday night with your wife isn't really,
no,
it's not really what it's supposed to.
yeah, it's
Though,
a very fun
though
time,
it
but
brought us closer together, I will say. We did a lot of
yeah,
healing, and yeah, so a lot builds up over years when you're dealing with as much stress as we did. So, I was
yeah,
thankful that those walls had been broken down, and when it when it came down to it, he knew how loved he was by me, and I knew how loved I was by him. And I don't know that that would have happened if we hadn't made, decisions to put each other first for that last year.
yeah. And to just try things to I think part of the frustration when you are loving and supporting somebody with mental illness is the seeming resistance to try things
Hmm.
because of the apathy or the
Yeah.
exhaustion. And that's very frustrating because you want them to get better because you love them.
Yeah.
And it seems to you like they don't want to get better. And
Hmm.
you, in one of your Facebook posts, one of the things I noticed, you said, intellectually he knew that he was loved,
Yep.
but this kind of there's just this part that will tell them that they're not, and that part just sometimes gets too powerful. And I suppose we're all desperately terrified of this happening to anybody we love, and it seems like such an enormous escalation. So what happened during this time to get him to this point?
Yeah. He'd had a couple low points incidents where he had threatened to hurt himself. I called the police, and he was checked out at the emergency room and released. He had a really great way of I don't want to say talking his way out of things, but he'd go to a counselor, and then after a couple
Mm,
sessions they'd be like, "You're healed, it's fine." And he's like, "No, I need someone
yeah,
who's going to break through that. I need someone who's going to see
yeah,
through my bullshit.
yeah. I have a counsellor that does that. I don't
Yeah.
like it all the time, but it works.
Yeah. Um, so in January, I think it was January, he ended up getting sepsis. He had a cut on his foot and got staph, and it turned into what we found out was sepsis. He was in extreme pain for a couple days. And I said, "You have got to go to the emergency room. You're acting insane." He was drinking to try to get a hold of the pain, and I said, "This is ridiculous. Go to the emergency room." He went. They found that he had staph, and aggressive staph, and his blood had turned septic. So they medevaced him to
Blimey.
they medevaced him to Georgetown Hospital, University Hospital, which is in just outside DC. It's about 2.5 hours drive from us. And he had a mass on his spine. It was like of staph. It had created some kind of like, it was basically all up and down his spine. But the problem is he was also
From a cut in his foot?
from a cut in his foot. It had, because it can
Wow.
enter anyway, really. But he'd stepped on glass and hadn't cleaned it or taken the glass out, and it just hadn't healed. And we thought it was just his
Yeah.
his troll feet, as he liked to call them, just like lots of dead skin, But the doctors think that's how it happened, because as soon as he got on antibiotics, that cut healed up. So when he got there, the problem was that he was also detoxing from alcohol. So he had to go into a medically induced coma essentially for 72 hours while they detoxed him. I didn't see him. His mom and his brother and sister went in to see him, but they said, "Don't take the kids." And he was in the ICU. They said she's not in any shape for visitors. So when he finally kind of came out, I went to go see him almost every day, and they were going to do spinal surgery. Long story short, they ended up doing spinal surgery on him to pull out the mass and essentially clean his whole spinal cord, because he'd had the staph all the way down to his thoracic region up to his C4, C5 or something. It wasn't completely wrapped, but it was a lot. It was a lot of junk. And then they took out one of his discs and replaced it with titanium rods because he'd had a degeneration. So it was pretty serious spinal surgery. So he was in a lot of pain. They'd had him on Dilaudid, IV Dilaudid, the whole time he was in the hospital, which was almost a month.
I'm sorry, I don't know what that one is. It must
like
be one I don't
morphine.
recognise. Is that
It's essentially morphine.
So it's an addictive
it's
drug.
like hydromorphone, I believe is the...
So morphine for a month.
Yeah. And then they release him with no real plan. They weren't even going to give him any days of medication. They were just going to send him home and tell him to find a pain management clinic.
Paracetamol.
Yeah. And I'm like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
He was honest with them about his history. He had overcome an addiction to heroin in 2000, late 90s or early, I think it was 2000. And so he was honest about that. They'd asked him, any prior drug use, and they essentially punished him because he had been honest about that. And they said, "Well, you have a drug history." And even though it was 23 years ago, we had to be very careful, which is true. Yes, absolutely. But you don't push somebody off a cliff. In fact, you need to be even more gentle with someone who has a history.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. It's like you and I have talked sort of personally about the feeling when you ask for help and you're honest about your struggles and you're met with kind of derision or just rejection. And so he's kind of confessed this and they punished him. I can understand them perhaps not wanting to prescribe it, but to then not give him an alternative or, talk to him in detail.
Yeah, or any kind of withdrawal or like step down. There was just no plan in place. So he did find a pain management clinic. They gave him 2 weeks of medication. When he went back for the second week checkup, they said they had gotten the paperwork from the hospital, and since he wasn't honest with them, because when he met with them, he didn't tell them about the drug use because they had, at the hospital, they had used it against him. So he didn't say anything this time, but it was in his paperwork. So the pain management clinic basically kicked him out and said, good luck. So the ER was helpful for a while, I think a week. They were able to help him out. He would go in and they would give him medicine. But the pain management clinic blacklisted him. So he wasn't actually able to get any help. Yeah.
That seems a really excessive reaction. Because, unless there's more to the story, which I don't think there is, he wasn't sort of, banging on the door and demanding medication. He was he was prescribed it for a month and then expected a cold turkey,
Yeah.
which seems kind of barbaric.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. He called his neurosurgeon a number of times. His home health nurse tried to intercede on his behalf. And the final straw was when he had a prescription from the ER for a couple days. It was just like 3 days of medication, and the pharmacy wouldn't fill it. And he just looked at me and he said, "I'm done. I can't keep doing this. Like, I am in so much pain. There is no hope. Nobody is listening to me. My doctors have essentially abandoned me." And I said, "Honey, let's keep fighting." He had an appointment for a neurofeedback session on Friday. This was what he died on a Wednesday. I said, "Can we please just go to the session on Friday? And if you feel like nothing has shifted, I will help you do this your way." He was like, at that time, he had been like going for the gun in the closet. And I said, "Don't do like this, and I just like, come back, sit down, talk with me." But his whole face had just changed. He looked like a toddler in the middle of a temper tantrum who was just terrified, who's just been like, it just set all his deepest fears
Fight or
on
flight.
fire. Yeah. He went in the bathroom. The kids had just gotten home from school. I asked him to, he was really upset. I asked him, I said, "Go in the bathroom. Let me get the kids doing something. I'll come back and let's talk." He went in the bathroom and he like put his head through we have like a glass cabinet. He put his head through the cabinet. And I came back, he's sitting in the bed, and I just sat on top of him and I'm like picking pieces of glass out of his hair. And I said, "Baby, I will never stop fighting for you. Like, we can do this." And he's like, "For what? I'm just going to be disappointed again. It's not going to work. We've tried so many things. I don't have any more energy. I cannot keep letting you guys down." And I said, "I've never loved anyone as much as I've loved you." And he said, "And I love you more than I've ever loved anyone either, but I can't keep letting you down." And I was like, "You're not letting me down," just trying to like pull him back through, but I couldn't. And then the kids were like doing stuff. So I locked the door and I said, "I'll be back." I went downstairs, was pushing Emma on the swing. Throughout this time, he's making phone calls to his doctor. He's trying to get a hold of someone at the hospital. He's trying to get someone to listen to him.
Help.
Yeah. So Emma's swing is like almost directly under our bedroom. So I'm like sticking my head out, listen. I'm thinking I'm hearing him talk through the ceiling, and I'm pushing her. And then I was like, "I need to go upstairs and check on him." I went upstairs, I unlocked the door, and he had blood coming out of his nose. And I said, "What is going on?" Like, I was so confused. I mean, he had the gun in his mouth, but I was so confused. I was like, my brain was just like, what? What's happening? And he was gone.
And he shot himself.
And he shot himself. And his last phone call had been 6 minutes prior to his neurologist trying to get help.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It was within a span of like 10 minutes that I was like, "I'll be right back."
Oh my God. I'm so sorry. That's really chilling. Sorry.
Yeah. I've spoken with
I've
spoken with two mediums, and they both, I don't know if this is better or worse, but they both told me that it was an accident. He didn't really mean to do it. They both said it was he was just toying around with the idea. But it just happened.
I went too far.
Yeah.
And in that moment, he would have felt like he was so backed into a corner, like a wild animal, and that desperately pleading for help, for somebody to help him, because in that moment he couldn't protect himself from himself, and nobody would help.
Yeah.
And it feels very familiar, not to this extent, but this kind of asking for help and not getting it is a really common theme for mental health and for widows. It's really, for it to happen that quickly in your home when you're pushing your daughter on a swing. I'm really, really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I mean, you're upset. I'm upset. Everyone's upset.
Yeah, it was. I will say, not to get graphic, but I was protected. there was no injury to his face, to his head. He was just looked like he was asleep. It was, yeah, that's why I was so confused. I was like, I went up to him, I'm like lifting his head, going like, why are you not breathing? I just didn't get it. It was so confusing.
Where had he shot himself? I
He
realize
was
I'm probably
laying,
asking really probing
no, he
questions.
was laying in bed. I used to say that bed, I mean, it's carried our whole relationship. It's where it's where Emma was made. It's where we told the boys about their dad. It's where, we really fell in love, and it's where he died. So I got rid of it. It's just that
You got rid of it. I was going to
I
say, I
can't
don't
keep
know as I would want to go back in that bed.
I did actually. Strangely
Oh.
enough, it was I well, I'm jumping ahead, but I'll tell the rest of when that day. But I found him. I realized what had happened. I went out, locked the door, and I called 911. I'm texting his sister. So we've all watched this downhill thing, and it wasn't that we were expecting it, but it at the same time wasn't a surprise.
It was and it's a concern, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
suppose we always think that something will pull them
Yes.
back. You know, the love for
Yes.
us, that the mental health services will come
Yes.
through in the end, or there'll be a miracle cure.
Yeah.
And hopelessness is it kills. It kills. If you can't see a way out and you can't see hope,
Yeah.
this is what pushes people to do this.
Yeah. So I texted his sister. She came over right away. Our son Isaac was actually on the phone with Will's mom when it happened. So I told them together, and just the police were like, get everybody out of the house. It was cold. It was March 14th. It was like windy. And so I have everybody in the car, and Emma's there just like, where's daddy? Where's daddy? And Carter's there. Liam is actually at his friend's house. So Carter's my 8-year-old, Liam's the 11-year-old. And Carter's like kind of figuring out what's going on. And Emma's not, but she sees that I'm upset. And then Rachel comes up and she's upset. And I'm just sitting outside the car. We had a bench next to our house. So it was on the upper our bedroom was on the second floor. And there's like a window, and then there's the back wall. And so his head was like against our back wall. Like we didn't have a headboard. We just had a mattress on the floor. And so I'm sitting against the brick wall, like essentially sharing the wall with him on the bottom floor. And they're like, do you need a jacket? Do you need to come inside? And I'm like, nope, leave me alone. Nope, go away. Like, my husband's gone. And they're like, well, what happened? Trying to talk to me. And it was like, can I just have a minute? Like, I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you in a minute, And I don't even think that, like, I was in shock for most of that afternoon. The police came or the detectives came and had me talk to them. The kids went with Rachel and they were gone. I didn't tell Liam until the next day, because I just was like, if I can protect him from this, I'm going to put it off. Like,
this is also a common theme, isn't it? We just either let them sleep,
yes,
let them have that,
yes,
or let a little bit more innocence.
yeah. So yeah, the detectives.
When you had to tell,
go ahead.
Sorry, I'll say it again. So when you did have to tell them, obviously your language is going to be very different for the boys and for Emma, and their understanding of mental illness is going to be very different. I mean, even for the boys, this is a concept. I mean, a friend of mine, her husband took his life quite recently, and she's now like, why wasn't he enough? Why weren't the children enough? And that sort of, because there's so many additional questions for those left behind. So if you don't mind, I don't want to push you too hard, but tell me a little bit about having to tell children that this has happened.
So the kids are very aware of Will's struggle from his childhood trauma. He was very open with it. He was a very emotional guy and did not hide his tears and unfortunately his sometimes anger outbursts. But the kids knew that he had been through some pretty dark stuff and why he felt so badly about himself. And we all would try to comfort him when he was low, and it didn't happen often. He didn't like sit out in the living room and cry. He usually would go to the bedroom, but sometimes it would overwhelm him, So they were privy to a lot of his inner thoughts, maybe more so in the last month, which I'm thankful for. So when I told Carter, I said, remember how Will was crying last week and talking to you about some of the stuff he went through as a kid and how he felt about himself. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, he was in so much pain, he was in so much pain. And I said, he decided that he couldn't live with that pain anymore. And he shot himself. And that's basically what I told Liam, but just a easier, sort of more adult version of it. Emma is different. I have not explained in detail to her that he, how he did it or why. She just knows that he died at home, and that's it at this point. Like, she hasn't really asked anything more. The messed up part is he was sick, but he was in the hospital for a couple months prior. So it's it's like, that's, I'm sure, where her brain goes. But I will be honest when it comes up. But I do let the kids lead. So I tell them as much as they need to know right then, and then if they want to know more details, I let them ask, and then I am frank and honest with them. I mean, we talk about the type of gun that he used. We talk about why he chose to do it where he did it. I mean, all these questions, like, what happens to the body after it's cremated. I mean, Rosie, the talks that we have are crazy sometimes. And like, I'm having a discussion with my 8-year-old about what happens to bones after they've been burned and how are they turned into dust, or into, oh my gosh.
Oh, I've had a few of those. Yes. What will happen to Dad's body? Will the sharks eat it? There's no sharks off the coast of Dover that I'm aware of. So it is. And particularly if you have a neurodivergent children as well, they tend to ask really kind of straight to the knuckle questions.
Carter. No holds barred.
Now, Will obviously he was neurodivergent himself, and you are yourself, aren't you? Because you messaged me, you sent me the most beautiful voice note. I'd sort of outed myself as autistic and having ADHD during conversation with Emma Gray. And you had been so moved by it that you'd contacted me, and I was in return very, very touched. And you yourself said that you have it's ADD over there, isn't it? But we would call it ADHD. And you believe that this was exacerbated by your grief, by the trauma of your first husband dying. And interesting, like, as I look back on my past, and I can see quite a lot of signs of it. I was a very high masker, but I think what happened for me was when I was widowed and when my life fell apart was I just couldn't mask anymore. I just couldn't. The mask started on, and actually getting sober for me was the thing, because, and funny enough, Lulu, that my the former co-host is staying with me at the moment, and we were just talking about the when you drink and you eat to excess, or you can keep the kind of ADHD gremlins at bay, and but they do come with really mental health problems, and it's an area that I don't know whether it's explored enough, the link between neurodiversity and mental health. And there just seems to me as a just to be such a high link to it,
and trauma. For sure. I think there definitely is. There's no doubt about it, because I did not struggle with ADD or ADHD through high school, even through college. I had no problem. I don't think it was till after, really after Ryan died, is when it got very bad. And having 3 kids, and there was a lot on my plate. My brain just, I think it broke. It's just like, I can't function.
And it's just that it's the I call them the bees. And when I've got 4 kids, and it's the logistics. It's and the strive for perfection, which we tend to be predisposed to. But I found personally that's been compounded by being a widow, because I feel like I need to now give them perfection.
You're responsible for everything.
Intellectually, I know. And I just think your life's been, it had a really shitty turn. So now I want everything to be brilliant for you. But of course, life doesn't, well, as you know, life doesn't happen like that. So, I think battling your own grief and the grief of grieving children, while also perceiving the world and processing emotions differently to how many others would, it does add to the isolation and the questioning of, am I doing this right? Am I grieving right? Which again creates this sort of loneliness. And I'm really glad that you felt able to talk to me, and I'm glad that we've had this having this conversation today, because it's nobody wants to be alone in this. And whilst we haven't walked the same path. We've walked a path that's similar.
Yeah. And then the neurodivergence adds such a complicated layer because you think, is this the grief? Is this unprocessed trauma? Is my unprocessed trauma actually a result of my neurodivergence? Or does is the neurodivergence a result of the unprocessed trauma? I mean, it's like round and round we go.
Am I depressed? Am I crazy?
Right.
What is this? And
Yeah.
piecing all of this together whilst processing such enormous feelings of loss, and having to announce his death to people as a suicide. That's a really big thing to have to do. And I hope you don't. I also want to sorry, I've just gone off on one of my tangents.
You're fine.
But one of the other things I noticed, and please tell me if you'd rather I didn't speak about it, but somebody must have asked you what you needed, and you told people what you needed, and I really admired that because in the grips of widowhood, like the things that you need are somebody to maybe help with the kids, and one of the things that you specified was financial support.
Yeah.
And I think that was really brave of you, because to admit that you're struggling financially is makes you very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And actually, but what a brilliant thing to do, because then people could, instead of flowers, wine, boxes of chocolates, you could have gift cards for supermarkets and Amazon vouchers. And I think I really admired that, actually. I thought that was a really brave thing to do, and I think more of us should have done that, because we all needed help.
Yeah, there was, unfortunately, with both of their deaths, neither of them had any type of anything. The life insurance policy went to Ryan's wife. I have no idea how much that was. The boys were left with nothing. And Will, since he was unemployed, he was also in debt, and he had nothing. So, and I was unemployed. I am unemployed. So when I would say I need financial help, that's literally it. Like, I can show up every day for my kids. I can do this heavy lifting, but if you're looking for something to do and you live far away, this is what I need help with. And I hate that it boils down to that. I know that you've talked about with life insurance, like, not money that you want, but damn, it sure would help to have that.
It helps.
It just adds another layer on top. I'm stressed constantly about, we can't do this, we can't do that,
And then we talk about wanting to make a nice life for the kids, but you do need money to do it. You don't necessarily need lots, but you do need some, because the world keeps turning, the bills keep coming, the mortgage or the rent needs paying. And Ben was the primary earner in our relationship, and I was on maternity leave. So when he died, the financial income stopped.
Just dried up.
I couldn't even get it to his bank account. So it's terrifying, and you feel really mercenary saying, I need money. But of course you need money, because you need money to survive. And right now, your primary concern needs to be nurturing those kids through their loss. And I've heard of people losing their homes, and because how you could go into work and function anyway is beyond me.
I have no idea. I was given 2 weeks of bereavement leave after Ryan died, and that was very generous, right? I mean, usually it's 5 days. But it was
5.
Yeah, in the US, it's usually about 5 days, and I just had to jump right back in. And I was able to separate it, but I can tell you right now, I'm barely ready to go back to do anything now, and it's been 4 months. So I don't know how.
4 months
I don't know how people do it.
No, John went back to work, and he found solace in it, because he was able to go and be a boss and do his thing at work and sort of separate. I ran Ben's wood business.
Yes.
There was no skill, but it kept me and the kids able to survive. And
you do what you do.
And you do what you got to do. And sometimes that is as simple as just sending up a distress and saying, I need some help. And I hope you got it.
People showed up in huge ways. They helped move us, because we moved 2 weeks after Will died. It had been sort of a planned move. Our lease was ending, and we were discussed moving closer to my parents as a family, but we hadn't put in any real plans in action yet. But when he died, things happened very quickly. I was able to find a townhouse, and both my parents are retired. And it felt like I just needed to be closer to them,
Yeah.
have better access to mental health care and healthcare in general. My older son is type 1 diabetic. We were driving like an hour and a half, 2 hours for his monthly endocrinologist appointments, and just stuff like that is
Yeah.
such an added stressor.
And I just have to say that diabetes is a really difficult
Oh
condition to
gosh,
manage. So you're then having to do
it is
that
such
as
a pain
well.
in
I
the
mean, you
ass, I'll
poor.
tell you.
Yeah, and you know what? I love the fact that you've still managed somehow to retain a sense of humour throughout this.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll be a dark humour
Oh,
because
it
that's what
is.
we
Yeah,
specialise in.
quite often.
But you know, you've had so much damage,
Yeah.
and the fact that you are able to talk about it, the fact that you're looking me in the eye right now and talking to me, it tells me that you are incredibly, and I know we get sick of being told this, but incredibly strong.
Yeah.
And I did write it down. You said to me something along the lines of, I feel like I was designed to handle more than the average bear, or something like this. And I thought, oh, that's such a.
Yep.
I wish you weren't. I really wish you weren't.
Yeah.
But you know, I can see that you're trying so hard for you and for your children. And I think that one day they will thank you for this. It feels thankless and like an endurance test at times, particularly with young children. And I want to tell you that it completely gets better, but of course it doesn't. But it
just
it
changes.
does. It changes, and their grief becomes different.
Yeah.
And we talk very, you know, it's how you talk a lot about Win and Mine, but I think that's so important, is just to keep that kind of dialogue going, because particularly for your little Emma, you know, the memories are mainly going to be learned, and that's what I have with tabs. It's you don't remember anything before 6 months. Oh, Melissa, it has been just incredible talking to you. And I would normally kind of ask you what life looked like now for you, because normally my guests are a little bit further into their week, because I tend to only interview people who've been a year in. But actually, I was so moved by your story, and you seemed like you really were ready to tell it. So I wanted to give you the opportunity. But I think that your openness and your kind of candor and talking about such really difficult and kind of emotive subjects. We're talking addiction and suicide. They're really big topics, and you have spoken. You brought me to tears. I mean, not every guest does that. And I just want to say that I want to kind of reach in and give you this hug and help and tell you that it'll all be okay. I can't, but I hope that it will be all right.
I think it will be.
I really do.
I have a lot of hope.
Yeah, and we know the importance of hope, right?
Yeah, there's a lot out there that we don't know, and I love
Yeah.
learning and figuring out kind of what the meaning is in this, and not that their death has a particular lesson to be taught in my life, but how can I now take those losses and turn them into something meaningful for myself and for others.
I see some counselling. Are you counselling or working in that arena? I see that
You're
for
not
you.
the
I
first
see that
person
somewhere.
to say that.
Yeah, I think it gives us a different empathy. I think I would have
Yeah.
perhaps liked to talk to somebody when I was first grieving who had gone through the same thing, and I may look into doing some peer support work at some point. But I guess it's what we're doing here. We're taking the tragedy and we're turning it into a guide, like a how-to for people on this journey.
You guys were a lifeline to me. I mean, seriously, I found you. It was within the first week, you know, and there's so many other, not so many, but there's other widow podcasts. But what drew me to yours was the storytelling. I wanted to know how these people went from losing, their spouse, their person, their love to walking. I couldn't even imagine, getting dressed and just how do you piece your life back together. And it was just, that's all I needed. That's all I wanted to listen to. I didn't want to listen to how-to books. I wanted to just hear people's stories.
And most of them, they kind of have an arc, they kind of go through this tragedy, and most, they kind of climb their way back out. And all of us have done it ourselves. Nobody pulls you out. You have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you talk about the lessons that come from a loss. And like you, I thought, oh no, there's no lesson. But I think the lesson that you learn is how you react to it, and how you can decide to continue to live, and that is a choice that we have to make, and it's a difficult choice when we're grieving, but it is a choice. Well, I think, look, I said to you, I said, I've booked 2 hours, we'll never use it. We've done an hour and a half.
Well, when you got, like
But
you said, you
it
got
was,
two dead husbands, so you got
two neurospicy women on their podcast. And to be honest with you, Minister, I feel like there's so much more I want to ask you and talk to you about. And I like to think that we will perhaps do something in the future, because
sure.
I really found you fascinating. And I'd like to maybe revisit you in a year and
Yes,
see what life looks like.
I
So
would love that.
let's stay in touch. We are in the States later in the year, but not your part. And as my American guests always tell me, it's a lot bigger than England. So who knows? One day, right? One day. But for now, my darling, you take really good care of you and those babies.
Thank you.
And just remember that you have a tribe out here who are willing you on and supporting you. You're not alone. All right. Take care, my darling. Bye-bye.